Tonight, a story 34 years in the making. An advocate for sexual abuse victims fights for change in our legal system. And Tulsa's Channel 8 makes a shocking discovery that will shake the legal community and the public trust. The flag outside the state capitol was fluttering only half as hard as the heart of the woman sitting in the gallery for the meeting of the House Committee on Criminal Justice and Corrections.
I was extremely nervous. I really was.
A school teacher for 20 years, Virginia Lewis is normally calm in front of a room full of people.
Recognize Representative Russillo for House Bill 2292.
But this was no ordinary room. Today she would be both teaching and testifying about sexual abuse.
This is the first time that I have gone public with my story.
A story which begins 34 years ago with an 11-year-old girl known as Ginger.
I was probably like every other little girl. I adored my dad.
The smiles in the pictures from her childhood are genuine, but these photos were all taken before it began.
The sexual abuse began when I was 11 years old and continued for 5 years on a nearly daily basis. Usually a horrifying visit in the early morning hours as the rest of the family slept.
The room sat in a stunned silence that would somehow grow louder when she read some quotes from a handwritten letter.
Quote, "I knew what I was doing was wrong and was criminal, but I did it anyway. I knew you trusted and adored me, and I exploited that so I could keep on doing it without getting caught or without having to figure out what was wrong with me. I was satisfying my own sexual needs at your expense." End quote. Those are the words of my father, George Michael Lewis, written to me.
It's a letter signed Love Dad, and she has preserved it like evidence for a case that never came to be. Michael Lewis received what's called a deferred prosecution agreement, requiring an acknowledgement of his misconduct and psychotherapy. In exchange, he would never face criminal charges. But, says Virginia, even if he hadn't gotten that deal.
Even if he hadn't, he probably would still be free anyway because of the statute of limitations.
Which is what House Bill 2292 is all about, extending the amount of time that child victims of sexual abuse have to come forward from 12 to 18 years.
There is no timetable on my recovery. There's no statute of limitations on my recovery, and there should not be any statute of limitations on the time in which an individual has to come forward.
And that is the main theme of her new role as an advocate for survivors of sexual abuse, launching her website toprevail.org in conjunction with her testimony before the House.
I welcome the opportunity to speak to any group, schools, churches, anybody who wants to hear my story.
As for Michael Lewis's story, his life as a high-powered attorney would take a turn recently as Tulsa's Channel 8 launched an investigation. This Friday, he was scheduled to teach a class called The Ethics of Representing Children for the organization Tulsa Lawyers for Children, whose mission statement is protecting rights of abused children.
However delayed, everyone deserves a chance to seek justice.
When Tulsa's Channel 8 contacted TLC and informed them of Virginia's testimony, they replied, "Mr. Lewis is a well-respected attorney and supporter of TLC. In light of these allegations, he has voluntarily removed himself as lecturer for the March 4th TLC training. When we reached out to Mr. Lewis himself, he said he would appreciate it if you could put off airing this story for a couple of days." Shortly after that, his profile page on his law firm's website was removed. And when we contacted Derner, Saunders, Daniel, and Anderson, they told us Mr. Lewis is on an indefinite leave of absence from the firm. Mr. Lewis then emailed us again, only to say he had no comment on his daughter's testimony.
My father was never.
But Virginia's testimony has elicited comments from survivors of sexual abuse.
Even just since Wednesday, I've heard from several survivors who have told me their story for the very first time.
After her testimony at the Capitol,
You're a modern day hero, so thank you.
lawmakers voted unanimously to pass the bill on to the next stage. As for Virginia,
Well, I can tell you this.
the next stage of her life is finally putting a voice
Sorry.
to the silence of all those years. letting other victims know they can be heard, no matter how long it takes.
I'm in the best spot I've ever been.
This story continues to develop. Just this afternoon, Channel 8 was notified that Virginia's father has resigned from his law firm. And those disturbing letters in her testimony, they are available in their entirety on her website, toprevail.org, where you can also follow House Bill 2292, which just passed the House unanimously on Monday and now heads to the Senate. Now, if you are a victim of abuse, Virginia is looking to start support groups, since she says you go from victim to survivor once you are empowered, and part of that empowerment is not feeling alone. You can reach her through her website, toprevail.org, or through the link on our website, KTUL.com.
My name is Ginger Lewis.
It began as a short speech in a small room of the state capitol.
This is the first time that I have gone public with my story.
But the response from Ginger Lewis's testimony that she was a victim of sexual abuse by her father has grown larger than she ever imagined.
I've heard from hundreds and hundreds of survivors from all around the world.
He probably would still be free anyway because of the statute of limitations.
She was testifying in support of HB 2292, seeking to extend the statute of limitations for sexual abuse victims, giving them more time to seek justice. It passed unanimously in the House, but then
It died in the Senate.
an indication, she says, of the amount of education needed by lawmakers who often fear a tidal wave of frivolous lawsuits if the statute isn't changed.
The facts and the research just don't back that up.
Once the law changed in California, for example, only 1,150 claims were filed out of a population of 35 million.
I don't think there should be a statute of limitations.
Tulsa County District Attorney Steve Kunzweiler lending his support to Ginger's effort to double down on another run at the statute of limitations next year.
We should not be depriving ourselves of the opportunity to prosecute somebody who is literally a scourge on our community and could be damaging more children out there.
The whole family suffered from it and will for the rest of their lives.
Meanwhile, out at the Muskogee Creek Nation,
What is he doing? Why is he doing this?
Ginger was invited by the nation to share her story as part of their family violence prevention program.
I believe that many times sexual abuse, whether it's in children or adults, is a hidden issue. And I believe that it's time that as a nation that we confront this, we bring it out in the open.
Called Perpetual Blessings.
Honored with a tribal blanket, the event was as moving for her as it was for the audience.
It was incredibly emotional and powerful.
As for her father, when our story first ran and we reached out to his law firm, we were notified that George Michael Lewis was on a leave of absence. It wasn't long after that before he was no longer with the firm. And just at the beginning of May, the Oklahoma Supreme Court accepted his resignation from the bar after a grievance had been filed challenging his honesty, trustworthiness, or fitness as a lawyer, with the court ordering that his name be stricken from the roll of attorneys.
My hairdresser asked me if I think that my dad wakes up every morning and feels badly about what he did to me. And I said, absolutely not. But I do think he wakes up every morning now and realizes that he's no longer an attorney.
Her mission to shed light in dark places continues on her website, toprevail.org, where she's launched a support group for other survivors of sexual abuse.
My first support group is at the end of this month.
Finding joy where there was once fear. Or, to paraphrase John Steinbeck, don't squeak like an apologetic mouse. Roar like a lion out of pride.
From this day forward, I will no longer be silent.